Alright, starting my pre-trip, starting with my lights, my clearance lights, my headlights, high and low beams, my right and left turn signal, my four-way flashers, and my marker lights. Not cracked or broken, proper color, and they work. Checking under the truck, there's no drips, no puddles, nothing indicating a leak. I'm going to move to the right side of my truck. Starting at the top, my radiator hose on top and bottom. Secured, not leaking. Coolant reservoir, it's secured, not leaking, operational range. It's got two hoses coming off of it. I'm going to check them, make sure they're secured, not leaking. The turbocharger, the pipe that runs under the cab, and the stack that goes up the back, they're secured, not leaking, no soot trails indicating a leak. The alternator, I'm going to make sure it's secured, the wires are tight, it is belt driven. I'm going to check that belt, make sure it's not worn or torn. Checking the tension on it by pushing down on it shouldn't flex no more than 3/4 of an inch. The water pump, it's secured, it's not leaking. It is also belt driven. I check that belt, make sure it's not worn or torn. Checking the tension on it, pushing in on it shouldn't flex no more than 3/4 of an inch. There's a steel line that comes off the back of it. I'm going to make sure it's secured and not leaking. I'm done with my passenger side. Walk around to the driver's side. My first part is my air compressor. I'm going to make sure it's secured, it's not leaking, it's gear driven. There's a steel line that comes off the back. It's secured, not leaking. The oil dipstick, it's secured. I check my engine oil, make sure it's in operational range. My power steering reservoir, it's secured, it's not leaking, it's operational range. The hoses coming off of it are secured, not leaking. My frame and cross members, I'm going to check to make sure they're secured, not bent or twisted. The steering gearbox is secured, it's not leaking, it's got hoses off of it. I check them to make sure that they're secured and not leaking. Going on to my steering components, my pitman arm, drag link, steering knuckle, tie rod, and tie rod ends, they're secured, not bent or twisted. My castle nut, cotter pin, and bolt is secured and present, and it's also the castle cotter pin and nut and bolt is present and secured at the knuckle. I go to my leaf springs. They're secured in the back and in the front. They're not bent or twisted. My leaf spring mounts, front and back. They are secured and not broken. The U-bolts. I'm going to check my U-bolts, make sure my U-bolts are present and secured. My shock absorber, secured at the top and at the bottom, and it's not leaking. I'm going to my brake system. All right. My hose, the brake hose is secured, not leaking. The brake chamber, it is secured and not leaking. Where the push rod and the slack adjuster meet, the pins and cotter pins are present and secured. That slack adjuster is secured. I check it by chalking my wheels, releasing my brakes, pulling out on it. It shouldn't move more than an inch. Then look in the back of my wheel, do my brake drum. The brake drum is not cracked or broken, and there's no oil or grease. The brake liners, I'm going to make sure the brake liners are secured, not worn dangerously thin, no less than 1/4 inch thick, no oil or grease. The inner and outer seals, I'm going to make sure that they're secured, not leaking. My sidewalls, inner and outer sidewalls, there's no cracks, they're not leaking. My tread depths, there's no less than 4/32 in tread depth and no uneven wear. Valve stem, I'm going to find my valve stem. The valve stem is not cracked, it's not leaking. I check my tire pressure there, make sure it's in operational range. I'd make sure my cap is present and secured. My rim, I'm going to make sure it's not dent or cracked. The lug nuts, they're all present and secured. I'm done with the front of my truck. I'm going to stop at my mirrors. My passenger side and my driver's side mirrors securely mounted, not cracked or broken. The door, I'm going to open it. It opens properly. The weather seal is intact, and it closes properly. My light, that's my marker light, my right and left turn signal, my four-way flasher. It's proper color, it works, and it's not cracked or broken. The fuel cap. I check that fuel cap, make sure the O-ring is present. I make sure the cap is on secured and it is not leaking. The tank and straps. The fuel tank and straps are secured and the tank is not leaking. Between the tractor and the trailer, you start with my air lines. My air lines are secured to the cab of the truck. I check my air hoses, make sure they're not leaking. The glad hands. I check my glad hands, make sure the seals are good. It's secured to the trailer and they're not leaking. Catwalking steps. I'll make sure they're secured, free of any obstruction or debris. My drive shaft. I'm going to check to make sure it's secured in the front and in the back and it's not bent or twisted. My electrical cable is securely plugged into the cab. I'm going to check the cable and make sure it's not illegal tape. I'm going to check to make sure that my electrical cable is plugged securely into my box on the trailer. My frame and cross members. I'm going to check them and make sure they're secured, not bent or twisted. My header board. I'm going to make sure the header board has got all of its rivets, there's no holes in it. If there were any lights in the front, I would call them out as these clearance lights. They're not cracked or broken, proper color, and they work. The back of my cab. I got reflective tape in the center and in the corners, and I want to check to make sure that they're clean and legible. My workstation lights. I want to make sure that they're the proper color, they work, they're not cracked or broken. My torque rod, dog bone, back underneath my trailer. I want to make sure that it's secured at the top and at the bottom and it's not bent or twisted. Moving to the drive axles. The leaf springs. I want to make sure they're secured in the back and in the front, not bent or twisted. My leaf spring mounts. I'll make sure that they are secured and they're not cracked or broken. My airbags. I want to make sure my airbags are secured. I want to make sure the airbags are not leaking. The U-bolts. I want to make sure all my U-bolts are present and secured. My shock absorber. I want to make sure the shock absorber is secured at the top and at the bottom and not leaking. My air lines. There'll be an air line coming in. I'll see it. Air lines is going to be secured, not leaking. The brake chamber is secured. It's not leaking. The push rod and the slack adjuster where they meet, the pins and cotter pins are present and secured. That slack adjuster, I'm going to check it, make sure it's secured. I chuck my wheels, release my brakes, pulling out on the slack adjuster, it shouldn't move more than an inch. My brake drums, I want to make sure my brake drums are not cracked or broken, no oil or grease. The brake liners, I want to make sure they're secured, no, not worn dangerously thin, no less than a 1/4 inch thick, no oil or grease. My inner and outer seals. I'm going to make sure my inner and outer seals are secured and they're not leaking. My tires, my sidewalls, make sure my sidewalls are not cracked and they're not leaking. My tread depth, I want to make sure my tread depth is no less than 2/32. I want to make sure there's no uneven wear. My spacing between my dualies, I want to make sure that it's evenly spaced and make sure it's free of debris. My valve stems, I'm going to check my valve stems, make sure they're not cracked, they're not leaking. That's where I check my tire pressures, make sure that they're in operational range. My caps are present and secured. My rims, make sure they're not cracked or dented. I'm going to make sure I check all my lug nuts and they're present and secured. My fifth wheel area, I start with my kingpin. It's secured, not bent or twisted. The apron, I'm going to check my apron and make sure the apron is secured and it's not cracked. It lies flat on the skid plate. I want to make sure there's no gap between my upper and lower fifth wheel. I want to make sure the skid plate is well greased, so no trouble with turnings. My pivot pin area, all my pins, cotter pins are present and secured. Also my saddle area, it's not cracked or broken. My release handle, I'll make sure it's in and down in locked position. My safety latch is in place. I'm going to check my mounting bolts, my clamps. I want to make sure that they're secured and make sure that they're not missing. All right, my locking pins. I want to make sure my locking pins are out in lock position. I do have a sliding fifth wheel. It is air operated. My hose is secured, not leaking. I'm going to also check the back of my tractor frame and between my landing gear, make sure I've got clearance to make my turns without striking the landing gear. Alright, I have a platform inside the frame. That platform is going to be secured, it's not cracked or broken. I would look into the back of my fifth wheel and make sure that my locking jaws are locked around the shank of my kingpin and my safety lever is in. I'm going to stop and check my mud flaps. Make sure they're secured, not dragging the ground or touching the tires. I got DOT stripping. I'm going to make sure it's clean and legible. My lights. I'm going to check my tail lights, my brake lights, my four-way flashers, my turn signals right and left, and my backup light. Make sure they're not cracked, broken, they're proper color, and they work. I'm going to check my floor on my trailer. I'm going to make sure it's secure from front to back and there's no holes. I'm going to check my frame and cross members from front to back. I'm going to make sure they're secured, not bent or twisted. My landing gear, it's secured, it's not bent or twisted. The landing gear is fully raised. The sand pads are secured, not bent, and my crank handle is stowed away in the hanger. I'm going to check my upper and lower rails. They are secured, not bent or twisted. I'm also going to check my clearance lights, my right and left turn signal, my four-way flashers, my ABS lamp, and my marker light. Going to make sure that they're not cracked or broken, proper color, and they work. My DOT stripping from front to back, I'm going to make sure it's clean and legible. I'm going to check my release handle on my tandem frame, make sure it's in and down in lock position. I'm going to make sure my locking pins are out in lock position. I'm going to check my tandem frame rail. I'm going to make sure it's secured, not bent or twisted. I'm going to check my stabilizer rods. I check my stabilizer rods and my airbags and along the sides. Make sure they're secured, not bent or twisted. I'm going to check my airbags. I'll make sure they're secured. I'll make sure they're not leaking. I'm going to check my shock absorber. I'm going to make sure it's secured at the top and at the bottom and not leaking. My brake hose, I'll make sure it's secured, make sure it's not leaking. The brake chamber, it's secured, it's not leaking. Where the push rod and slack adjuster meet, the pins and cotter pins are present and secured. My slack adjuster is secured. The way I would check it is by chucking my wheels, releasing my brakes, pulling out on the slack adjuster. It shouldn't move more than an inch. My brake drums, I'm going to make sure they're not cracked or broken, free of oil or grease. The brake liners, I'm going to make sure they're secured, not worn dangerously thin, no less than a 1/4 inch thick, no oil or grease. The inner and outer axle seals, I'm going to make sure they're present and secured, not leaking. When I leave the tandem area, I'm going to look at my mud flaps. They're secured, not dragging the ground or touching the tires. Coming to the back, starting with my lights, my clearance lights, my tail lights, my brake lights, four-way flashers, right and left turn signal. I'm going to make sure that they're not cracked or broken, they're proper color, and they work. My reflective tape, I'm going to make sure that it's clean and legible. The doors, I'm going to make sure they open and shut properly, the weather seal is intact. The door ties, I'm going to make sure that they're present and secured. I'm going to check my DOT stripping, make sure that it's clean and legible. My DOT bumper, it's not bent or twisted beyond ineffectiveness. I would check my right side the same way I check my left side. This completes my pre-trip.
How long did that take?
15